£1 billion stadium, 6 time-lapse cameras, 72 hours of capture, 1,990 gigabytes of data, 39,000 photos, 244,000 likes, and 5.8 million views and counting. This video is about how I captured this £1 billion stadium transformation in East London. This project was captured for Shooting Shark Productions and I was referred by Adrian Cabello. A quick shout out to both of these people. I've linked their websites down below. And over there you can also find the finished video which you'll see on the NFL YouTube channel. My brief was very simple: capture a 72-hour time-lapse of this stadium transformation going from a football pitch to an NFL pitch. This is the Tottenham Hotspurs Stadium, which cost £1 billion to build and features some really cool technology, including but not limited to a sliding pitch that splits up into 3 and slides away to reveal what will be the NFL pitch right underneath. Before this project started, I figured out what the challenges would be. We are talking about storage challenges, how to power the cameras, what about the changing light over the 72 hours, how to deliver the files on time, and which angles I would be capturing on which lenses and cameras. In this video, I'll talk you through the setup, how I shot it, how I edited it, and how we ended up with a very successful time-lapse project that was delivered almost instantly after the shoot was finished. The first challenge I tackled for myself was figuring out which intervals to use. If you're planning a 3-day and 3-night shoot, you don't want to overshoot, but you also don't want to undershoot. So I did some calculations and figured out how much data I'd be generating at which intervals, how many photos, and how long that footage would be. The client requested a minimum of 3 minutes of footage, which I figured wasn't too hard to figure out. So I did some calculations, as you can see on this sheet here, and came up with the intervals that we ended up using from beginning to end. The next challenge is how to power these cameras. You can shoot with external batteries like this big Anker battery that I've used, but I figured out we were going to be shooting a little bit more than I expected, so we requested a power cable to be pulled over to the main shooting site, and on camera B, which is on the west side of the stadium, we had a USB-C PD adapter charging the Lumix camera. I shot on an S5 II, an S5 IIX, and a GH6, and I also captured on a GoPro Hero 12, as well as the Enlapse Tiki 3 Pro Plus, which I've made videos about in the past and we'll talk a little bit more about in this video later on. And I also shot some stuff on an Insta360 camera. Once I'd done my calculations of how many photos I'd be taking roughly, I figured out what kind of SD cards I needed and how much storage I needed to bring on site. Because this was a very fast turnaround, the video would be going live on Saturday morning and the shoot would end on Friday morning. So that's a pretty tight gap there to do all the post-processing. I decided to only work with JPEG images. That's right, no RAWs were edited. I did capture them just to have them for future reference, but majority of the stuff that went public was from JPEGs. If you know how to light them and how to shoot with your camera, that is not a huge deal. Also, the technology built into the Lumixes is really nice if you want to shoot long day to nights with no flickering, because they just do it so well. So that's storage and power figured out. Now, what about the changing lighting situations? The sun sets, the sun rises, the ambient light changes. You need to adjust your exposure settings, but do you do that manually? Do you run around if there's a little bit of shadow coming in from clouds as well when it gets a bit darker? Do you do the full-on LR time-lapse approach, or do you go with the trusted setting that you know will work well, which is aperture priority mode with auto ISO on, which is limited to ISO 1600 max. So the changing light is not an issue at all. The cameras do a really good job at gradually changing settings when the light is changing. So I didn't even have to touch the cameras at all. The only times I touched the camera was to check if the focus was still good because of temperature changes, for example, in the lens. That can affect your focus, and to offload the SD cards, I turned the sequence off while it was shooting as well. Speaking of SD cards, 256 gigabyte SDXC cards times 2 in each camera, and then I would dump them on 2 terabyte solid state drives. I managed to stay just under 2 terabytes for this project, which is good, so I could dump all the footage on one SSD and have another SSD on site for a backup, because if your footage isn't backed up, you might as well consider it lost. As for the angles, which brings us back to the start of the video, I did a location scout before the shoot began to figure out all the angles that were accessible that I knew wouldn't be bothered by workers or people walking in front or around the camera and potentially bumping them. So I figured out the best spots and I talked to the client what they wanted as well, which was one wide angle side view which, because it's so wide, we shot on 16mm on the full frame camera, of course, and one angle from the north side of the stadium, which was shot on 20mm, because that's the other wide angle lens that I had. I have a 9mm lens on the way, which I'm very excited to test out. That would have been even better for this shoot, but these two lenses and cameras I knew would be a flawless result, so I set them up and I did a couple of test shots. I offloaded the footage before we committed to the long shots, obviously, to make sure that everything's nice and in focus and the frame fits and that it would crop well for 16:9, as well as vertical delivery, because that's the world we live in these days. And then you do the testing, you verify the content that you captured, and then you start the sequence. As for other angles and potentially used as backups, I used a GoPro Hero 12 in night lapse mode, which is also really good at capturing changing light situations, as well as, because it's a 7x8 or 8x7 sensor, it's really good for wide and vertical delivery. Then on the west side of the field, I used the Nlapse Tiki 3 Pro Plus. Shout out to Nlapse for loaning me another unit to use on this shoot. The workflow here is really cool. You shoot JPEGs and DNGs and you save them on the SD card. It's from two cameras pretty much, but then you upload that footage to their online hub, which you do need a subscription for, but I think it's very much worth it. They stitch it online, deflicker it, and then you can download the stitched files and create your own video, or you can use the online software to create a video that you can download straight from the platform. I've used the Tiki now in a bunch of situations and I'm very, very impressed. I've linked the video that I've made about it in the past up here as well. There's one more bit of hardware that I used for extra B-roll time-lapses captures on the GH6, which is the Sirp Magic Carpet, which is a carbon fiber slider, so it's nice and lightweight. And on that, I've got the Genie 2 linear device, which creates a motorized single-axis movement. You could also pair that with the pan and tilt head that I used for separate shots, but combining them makes it a little bit top heavy and I didn't have infinite support systems with me. So I just kept to either a pan and a tilt motion or a slider motion for nice reveal shots, which was extremely helpful to cut to in the edit. I mentioned support systems earlier. That was another little challenge. How do you mount these cameras so that they stay in the exact same position without budging at all over 72 hours? I use Manfrotto super clamps and Manfrotto ball heads. You can tighten these really, really tight on any sturdy railing or fence. You just, of course, have to make sure that that railing or fence doesn't move. So do some testing before you commit to your sequence to make sure that your camera will stay still. I also strapped all the cameras with an extra security strap to make sure that if they were to come undone somehow, they wouldn't crash down on anyone or just on the floor and ruin the hardware. I used the Peak Design slide light straps for that, which is just incredible value and it holds an insane amount of weight. I often use these straps to secure my cameras in many, many places. I also had an extra GoPro with me to capture some behind the scenes content, which is how I got these shots. Yes, that is indeed a lot of kit to bring, but I just wanted to make the most of this pretty unique situation to capture some time lapses and hyperlapses as well in this very special stadium. For the hyperlapses, I used a tripod that I used as a monopod pretty much with the GH6, and then I also shot some Insta360 shots that just make it so much easier to create fun things in post. The resolution and the dynamic range isn't the same as shooting on a mirrorless camera, of course, with the Insta360, but it's incredible what you can create with that just out of pocket and the built-in stabilization. So that is the majority of the challenges figured out: the storage, the power, the light, and the angles. But what about delivery? Rendering files takes a while, especially if you're dealing with thousands and thousands of files. I ended up with just under 39,000 photos, so I made sure that I was editing as I went along or as the shoot went along. This means sporadically or occasionally at set times, every 12 hours or so, I would offload the footage from the SD cards and I would make sure that the camera is still running when I take the card out, that it's still clicking away on the other card. I would offload that into a Lightroom catalog and then start the render while everything is still shooting, obviously. There is absolutely no gaps in any of the captured footage, which is what I wanted. I wanted a completely smooth, flicker-free capture from beginning to end of the 72 hours of the entire transformation of the stadium. The only way you can pull this off is by having reliable gear, having a little bit of knowledge and experience, doing some testing beforehand, and making sure that you've double-checked all of your settings and your shoot beforehand. Once it's up and running, there's not much else to do besides getting creative, shooting some hyperlapses on your third camera, which was the GH6, which is of course a micro 4/3 sensor, which gives me a 4:3 aspect ratio, With a wide lens, that means I can get some nice wide angle sequences that are also kind of easy to crop for vertical social media delivery, because that's what everyone's watching on now. If you look at the views that this video got on YouTube, it is not a lot, but the one that they posted on their Instagram on the NFL and NFL UK pages, that is close to hitting 6 million views, which is one of my most viewed videos so far, which is pretty fun. And that's pretty much all I've got for you today, a insight into the behind the scenes or the making of a commercial time-lapse project for a new client in an incredibly impressive stadium location surrounding with some really cool people that I met. Another big shout out to Adrian and to Shooting Shark Productions for getting me on board. Hopefully we can do this again in the future. If you, dear viewer, want to see more of this kind of content, let me know in the comments down below. If you have any questions, drop them down there as well. And make sure to check out my free ebooks. I've got a new free ebook, which is all about how to monetize your time lapses and hyperlapses. And I've also got an ebook about how to shoot hyperlapses and time lapses, which has been getting some great reviews. They're available for free. You'll get to subscribe to my newsletter, get all the updates, get the store discounts, etc. Store discounts are valid for my time-lapse courses. Check those out as well. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope this was insightful. You learned something. And yeah, thanks for being here. And I hope to see you on the next video. Bye-bye.